So I've been asked to tell the story of our POA. And of course, talking about myself is one of my favorite things to do. So when I was asked to do this, I thought, yeah, we'll do that. So I want to start the story actually with my mom. Um, and when she was 19 years old, which was in 1921, she inherited from her uncle, who was a rich guy, $250,000 in today's money. And she decided at that time that she was never going to be dependent on anybody for money, certainly not a man. She was one of the original feminists, I guess. And so she decided that she would learn how to invest that money. And that $250,000 actually, she did invest it. She did a very good job of investing it over the years. And it enabled her to be independent throughout her life. So around the time when I was 19, she and my dad separated, but she had enough money. She didn't need anything. So it was she was I guess you could say the inspiration for me being in the investment business because she used to take me to financial seminars. So if you can imagine a 16-year-old boy at a no money down real estate seminar or a bond swap seminar, well, that was me. And it was boring, I can tell you, for a 16-year-old, but occasionally the speaker was interesting, engaging. And so through osmosis, I guess, I kind of absorbed all that stuff, not knowing that one day I'd be doing that for a living, but I absorbed it. Um, the importance of my mother in that regard is that she kind of, I guess, trained me, bred me to be who I am today. But what also happened was that because she was living on this money, this was her security, this was her identity. And in 1974, if you go back and look at the history of the markets, you'll see that we had one of the worst bear markets in the history of the United States. And the stock market went down significantly. And my mother was a relatively aggressive investor, and so she had almost all of her money in the stock market. And this is what was supporting me and her. We were without my dad. And so when that hit, I was a kid at the time, but I could tell how dramatic it was for my mom to have to experience that. So I guess that's where the seed was planted in me that these things, these bear market things are like a bad thing. As a kid, I didn't really know. She sheltered me as my mother from that, but I still knew that all was not well. So you fast forward to 1987, and then it happened again. The big stock market crash dropped 25% in one day. So if you can imagine, this is all the money you have in the world. You're living on that. You're supporting your son. All this is happening, and you have a crash like that. Actually, she wasn't supporting me at that time, but it was all the money that supported her at that time. And so, again, the distress of that for somebody who's relying on this money as your security and your future. So that imprinted upon me. And so I decided when that was going on, I wasn't in the investment business, but I had joined New York Life and was essentially a life insurance salesperson. But while I was doing that, I I didn't particularly like the life insurance business. I liked what it did. I liked the idea of life insurance as a means of protecting your family financially and the security you can bring. So I liked that part of it. But selling life insurance was kind of not my cup of tea, as it were. And so while I was doing that, I had in the back of my head that that bear markets are not a good thing. I had an interest in investments because of my mother, and so that was kind of percolating in the background. And I joined New York Life in 1989. What happened after that was that as I said, I decided I did not like to be in the life insurance business per se, and I had ambitions of having my own company, of being an entrepreneur since I was a kid. And so I decided that one way of learning that would be to call on business people, small business owners, entrepreneurs. And so New York Life had a whole array of investment products that were designed for small business owners. So I decided to go into that world. because I thought two things. One is I would learn so much from all these people that are doing what I want to do eventually, but also because I had such an interest and a passion, and it was more complicated, if you will, more it required more planning, is more sophisticated. It kind of it kind of interested me, and so I went into that world, and so I did that, and I had success with that, um, and then I was looking around and I was noticing that the people that were doing the best, that were the most successful, were the people that were in the estate planning business. And so I decided that I would go into the estate planning and work with business owners to talk to them about how to transition their business to their kids and estate planning in general. And as I was doing that, there was a guy locally, I won't name names, but his first name was John. And he was doing living trust seminars, and he was very successful at it. He was doing quite well. He was advertising in the newspaper, and so I'm, as I say quite often, I'm a equal opportunity plagiarizer, and so I decided that if he's so successful, that I would basically just copy what he was doing. So I started doing putting ads in the paper for estate planning seminars, and started to have some success doing that. I kind of looked at his model and how he was doing things, and I thought, well, I can do better than that. I think there's a better way of doing it. So I kind of molded it to my personality and my way of thinking, and had a good amount of success doing that. Along the way, our Congress, in their infinite wisdom, decided to raise the estate tax exemption. And by doing so, they basically made the estate taxes something that did not apply to the people that I was working with anymore. And so essentially, the tax law change put me out of business, if you will. I had no interest in working with people that had, 10 and 20 and $30 million, where now the estate planning world had moved, because I found that the people that I had a rapport with were average, normal people that weren't necessarily wealthy, that had worked their whole life, and that kind of thing. So I wanted to continue working with those people. So that's at the time that I decided that I would go into the financial planning. So I went back to the very same people, those business owners and all the people that I did the estate planning for. And I said to them, you know what, I've decided that I'm going to start doing investments. And so I went back to those very same people, and they were kind of the core beginnings of the financial planning business. Now, during that time, that was about 1995 is when I switched to the investment side. And that was about the time when, because I was now in the investment world, that I really wanted to educate myself, and I wanted to have a good knowledge. And to this day, we have a core value that says that education is confidence. It's being competent is an important value in my opinion. And so, in the process of educating myself, I went to a convention in Las Vegas that was a financial planning convention. And when I was there, one of the breakout sessions was about bear markets. And I remember saying to myself, I need to go to that one. That was actually one of the big reasons why I went to it, was because that breakout session interested me, because I wanted to learn, given the experience with my mom, how could I protect my clients from that same eventuality? Because I wanted to work with people who were retiring soon, and they would be in that same kind of world. And so I went to this breakout session, and the presenter had all these slides where he was showing all the bear markets that had happened, going back to the Great Depression. And as he was putting those slides up, he was showing the stock market, and superimposed on it, he had the 200-day moving average. But he never talked about the 200-day moving average. It was on every slide, but he never said a word about it, which kind of, I didn't understand that. But I was just sitting there, and I was looking, and I noticed that every time the market went down, it crossed under the 200-day moving average. And I thought, wow, that is really interesting. So I kind of lost. He was talking about the behavior of bear markets, which is kind of like talking about the behavior of a tornado. The wind starts blowing and it destroys everything in its path and all that, which is, great. But that doesn't help me in trying to predict one or mitigate the effects of one, just learning what it does. But that 200-day moving average was fascinating to me. So I came back home after that convention, and I decided, wow, that 200-day moving average, that's really interesting. And so I had an IBM ThinkPad. And for those of you who are old enough to remember those, they have the little eraser thing in the middle that is your mouse, you know, the little red nub that sticks up there. And we had paper floppy disks at the time. And so I had paper floppy disks inside there. And my wife and I were going to drive up or down, anyway, on the coast of California. We had a long drive ahead of us. And so what I did was, before we left, I went to the library and I photocopied the closing prices of the S&P 500 index going all the way back to 1900, I believe, is how far I went back. And then I entered all those dates into the Lotus 123 spreadsheet. So for those of you who remember those, that was the precursor to Excel. And as we were driving, as my wife was driving, I was on the laptop and I was typing all this stuff in. And I entered it all in. And then I put a formula for the 200-day moving average. And then I said, what if the stock market went under the moving average, you know, every time? Every time it does, we sell. And what I found was that created so many sells. It was not workable. It was not feasible. So I said, okay, well, I changed the formula and I said, I want to be able to tweak it so I can say what percentage, you know, of with the 200-day moving average would be the best place for us to sell. Well, while I was doing that, all of a sudden I'm sitting in the car there, I'm doing this, my wife is driving, and I start to smell burnt plastic. And I'm like, wow, something's on fire. And I'm looking at my wife and she goes, yeah, I smell it too. And then I look at my laptop and literally the keyboard was caving in. It was melting. We had it plugged into the car lighter, and I guess the transformer, it wasn't, but the electricity was too much or something. So this thing was like literally catching fire in my lap. And I had a paper floppy in the thing that was, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to save my work. This was like 4 hours worth of work. So I saved it onto the floppy, pulled the floppy out. We stopped the car. We put the laptop on the side. And it literally like turned into a melted thing. I don't know, it was some glitch that happened with that computer. Anyway, long story short, I fiddled around with it and came up with the percentage that I felt was the happy medium between never getting out and getting out every single time. That satisfied both the mitigation of the downside that bear markets bring, but also satisfied the very rough ride that clients would have if every time we hit our signal, we'd have to get out and then, you know, and all of that. I also, because of the symmetry of it, I said the percentage that we were going to use to get out would be the same one that we were going to get in by. Years later, a client told me that, Ken, where you get back in is not the best place. And let me show you why. And he did. He's an engineer, and one thing you know about engineers is that once they retire, they have nothing better to do than to spreadsheet their money, which is what he did. He had he had like 25 spreadsheets, and he showed me in the matter of 15 minutes, and I said, done. That's our new buy signal. So I had that in the back of my mind, and this was 1995, and so I was going into the investment business. And also at that time, I started my radio show. So a lot of stuff kind of came together at the same time. So as I was doing my estate planning seminars, a radio salesperson by the name of Sherry came to me and she said, you know, you're advertising all these estate planning seminars in the newspaper. You ought to come and do it on the radio. There's a guy locally who has a 3-hour talk show with regard to investments and all that. And he doesn't want to talk for 3 hours. So she said, would you be interested in doing a 15-minute segment or a 10-minute segment at the end of his show where you talk about estate planning? He thought it would be good for his show and it would be good for your business, so you'd be interested in doing it. So I said, yeah, I'd be interested. So I went on and I started doing, this was back when I was doing just at the end of the estate planning and the transition into the financial planning. So I was doing that. And one thing I noticed about him was he'd show up in his shorts with flip-flops. He had the little TV where he had the basketball game on, and he had the earphone. He was talking. People would call in and say, you know, what should I do with my IRA? And his answer was, that's a very good question. Here's my phone number. Call me on Monday. Next caller. And he was watching the game. He didn't care about what anybody was asking about. I mean, basically, he'd just say, okay, call my number on Monday. I can't answer it on the air. Too complicated. And he'd move on to the next caller. And he basically did that for 3 hours. And he was very successful. So I thought to myself, wow, I can do that. So a few months after that, as I got more into the financial planning side of things, I went to that radio salesperson and I said, Sherry, I want to not be a guest on his show. I want to do my own show. And she repped another radio station, which was KAAM. And it was 620 on the AM dial. If you know radio, the farther left you go on the dial, the smaller the number, the more powerful the signal is. So 620 is a super powerful signal. You can, at night, they actually had to tone it down because the FCC said that they interfered with stations that were literally, 1,000 miles away. And so I went on that. I said to her, I want to go on that station because they played music that people who were over 50, would be interested in. At the time, it was Frank Sinatra and that kind of music. It was called American Standards. And so she said, well, that's a music station. And I don't think you're going to be able to do, like a talk show on a music station. And I said, well, let's just go talk to the program director and ask him. And she said, okay. So we met with him. His name was John McCoy, and Jaan, John. And he was like, nope, we're a music station. We do not do talk and all that. And I said, well, but I think that your listeners would be very interested in retirement planning ideas, Social Security ideas, estate planning stuff. I said it would be a compliment to your radio station. And John said, okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you on at 8 o'clock on Saturday. And I thought to myself, and at the time, I think I was 30, and I was like, what? 8 o'clock on Saturday? Who the heck is awake at 8 o'clock on a Saturday? Well, guess who is? People who are over 50 who've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning because they wanted to avoid the heat, and they've already been going for their walk, and they've already been in the garden and all this stuff. So I didn't know that, but I said, okay, I'll take what I can get. Beggars can't be choosers. And so I went on the air on KAAM. And I was on the air for 6 months. And I decided I wasn't going to promote myself very much because I wanted to earn the right to do that. And the manager of the station, he came to me and he said, Ken, you don't promote yourself. You don't give anybody a phone number. You don't do anything. All you're doing is giving out information. And I said, yeah, that's because I want to earn the right to do that. And he said, no, you need to start now. You should have been doing that already. The other thing that happened was, so we were the first talk show on a music station when we did that. That was actually, I didn't realize it at the time, but no other music station, I believe, in the country had a long format talk show on it. The other thing that happened was that when I went on the air, I was so scared that nobody would call in and I would not have anything to talk about it. I wanted to avoid like being on the air for an hour with no one, no calls, and I had nothing. So I went to the show always prepared with lots of material, with lots of content. And I'd start off the show by saying, on this show today, what we're going to talk about is this, this, and this, and this, and this. And then the callers would come in and they started asking all their questions. And I started getting people calling me and all of that saying, Ken, we really wanted to hear what you were going to talk about. The callers can't formulate their questions. They're nervous. And besides, it's the same questions over and over again. We want to hear from you. So about 6 months in, I decided, after I started promoting our seminars, I decided that I was going to not take calls anymore. It was basically going to be me doing a monologue. And the result of that was unbelievable. Literally, the reservations at our seminars quadrupled with that very first show, and we never looked back from that. So making it a monologue was very, it was different because all the other shows were talk show, were call-ins. So I think we were one of the first shows to actually do an entire monologue in the financial world. I was kind of copying Rush Limbaugh because he was the most successful radio guy at the time. And his show primarily was a monologue. He took calls, but mostly he did the talking. So the show became very successful in terms of, and what I offered on the radio show was an invitation to come into our seminars. And I remember one seminar where it was poor. I used to arrive for the seminar about an hour before it started, and I'd park. We used to do it at this hotel, and I'd park in the covered parking, and I'd walk over and I'd go and I'd go to the seminar and get there an hour before everybody else arrives. And there was all with early people, and I'd kind of chat with them. So on this particular occasion, it was pouring rain. I mean, it was cats and dogs. And I go park in the covered parking, and I get out of my car, and I'm crossing the little drive into the hotel that wasn't covered. And I noticed that there's all these people standing in line, and the line went down the side of the hotel and turned the corner. And I was like, wow, I wonder what all these people are here for. And so I go inside, and the seminar that we did was always on the second floor, and we used like the ballroom that was at the far end. They had like 6 ballrooms, and they were separated by accordion walls, that you can separate. And ours was on the end. And so I'm climbing up, I go up the stairs, and all these people are along the stairs. And then I go down the long hall, and there's all these people along this long hall. I'm wondering, what are all these people doing here? And then I get to the table where Gail, my assistant, was, and she looked at me with this frantic face, and she goes, Ken, all these people are here for the seminar. And I looked at all these people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are all here for our seminar? So the room was only set up for 100 people, and I thought, we've got at least 300 people here. So I quickly got to the manager, and I said, we need to open this up. He took down 2 rooms with accordions. People were I mean, this was an hour early in the rain. And so people started going in. We got them all registered. And then it became like standing room only. And one man actually got up and went to the bathroom. And when he came back, somebody had taken his seat, and they almost got into a fist fight over it. So I'm standing there on the stage. And so this was my moment of being a rock star. I actually got to experience what it was like. But I decided, you know what? We will never have a big seminar like that, because it's just not, we had 3 ballrooms worth of people. I couldn't connect with anybody. I don't think anybody connected with me. But that was the success we were having. Well, fast forward to 1998. And John McCoy, who became a very good friend until his death a few years ago, young man, in his 50s. But he came to me and he said, Ken, and he was one of the owners of the station, and he said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. I said, what's the good news? He says, the good news is, he was a client. He said, I've got good news. I'm going to be bringing you a lot of money to invest. And I said, oh, really? Why? What's going on? That's great news. He goes, yeah, well, the bad news is that we've gotten an offer that I cannot refuse from Disney to buy our radio station. And I was like, So all of a sudden, the station that I was on, that was for people over 50, became The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Bambi. Definitely not the demo that we were after anymore, and we went off the air. And so all of a sudden, my fantastic way to reach people, invite them, and get clients went away. And so I'll never forget how, the low point of this was I decided to do seminars in retirement homes. And there was one retirement home that we did a seminar in, the first one actually that we did. And at 7 o'clock, the appointed time we always started our seminars, there was literally nobody there. And Gail was like, I said to Gail, if we get to 7 o'clock and nobody's here, we're just going to wrap it up and go home. And it was about 5 minutes till 7. And of course, we're in the retirement community, and we're inside this room, and there's a door. And this woman is like pushing this old lady who's in a wheelchair. She's pushing her, and she looks in the door, and she goes, oh. So then she just turns the wheelchair, and she comes in. And the lady in the wheelchair was so old and so out of it, and she weighed, I don't know, she looked like she weighed 90 pounds. She was very, very skinny, looked like she was, in her 90s, and not with it. And the lady goes, so how long is your seminar for? And I said, well, it's 2 hours. And she goes, so I'm going to just leave her here, and I'll be back in 2 hours. And so she just left her there. And so I looked at Gail, and Gail looked at me, and I said, all right, we're going to do it for her. So I did a 2-hour seminar for a lady that I don't think understood or even processed a single word I said. So forevermore, whenever I complained about anything, Gail always looked at me and she said, Ken, remember the retirement home. That, everything after that is better. And so she always reminded me of that anytime I was in a complaining mood. A year later, John McCoy called me and he said, Ken, I've got good news and I've got bad news on my cell phone. And I said, all right, I'll take the good news first. And he said, the good news is that KWM is going back on the air. And I said, wow, really? He goes, yep. And we're going to be on 770 on the dial. So not as good as 620, but still pretty powerful signal. And he said, we love the format. We've been thinking about it and we got our big cash out from Disney, but we want to go and we want to bring it back, bring KWM back. And I said, that's great. So what's the bad news? He says, the bad news is that we're in business with this, basically a conglomerate of radio stations, and they don't want you on. He said, I sold hard, and they don't want you. And I said, really? And he goes, yeah, it's a music station, and they want the pristineness of music. They're not going to put talk on a music station. I said, all right, well, I've seen this movie before. So I said, can you schedule an appointment with me with the owner? So the owner's name was Don. So I went to talk to Don, and he was like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. And I said, well, what if I could show you that your listeners want my show on your station? If your listeners told you that, would that change your mind? And he said, well, I'd consider it. So we had clients that we had garnered from that radio station, KWM. And so I sent out I think we had email at the time, but an email to everybody. And I said, I need you to, or we asked all of our clients to send me something in writing that says that the music format and the format of my show were compatible, and together it was actually better than not. And it rained mail. It rained. Every day I go to the mailbox. I mean, this was a long time ago. I still get emotional about it. I mean, the mailbox was full of people. They all wanted to help out. And I mean, people wrote on napkins. People had a piece of paper where they printed it on one side and they wrote on the other side. I think as you get older, you do that. I'm starting to do it myself now. I don't waste paper. But people were doing all kinds. They sent me on doilies. They typed it out. They put it on Hallmark cards. It was like unbelievable. I couldn't even believe it. And so what I did was I gathered all of that, and it was, and I took it to visit with Don, and I said, Don, these are your listeners. These are your listeners, and here's what they said. And so he said, okay. And I said, well, but I don't want 8 o'clock in the morning. I want 11 in the morning. So I got cocky, and he said, yeah, you got it. And so 11 o'clock was when we went on 770 now, and 770 was incredible. It was better than 620 ever was. So I had a problem. And the problem was that I had too much business coming in. I couldn't handle it. And so at this point, I brought in 4 other guys. And when I say guys, one of them was a female. And asked them if they would help me. They were people that worked at New York Life, where I was working at the time. And so we, our ragtag band of buccaneers, I guess, we worked all the leads that were coming in, all the new clients that were coming in from 770. So I always wanted to be on the largest station in Dallas, which at the time was KRLD. And the guy who was on that station did some shenanigans, and the SEC basically shut him down. And so the rep from KRLD called me, and I'd been talking to him over time, because I was interested, but I only wanted a good time slot. Otherwise, I didn't want to do it. And so this guy who had lost his license and was off the air now had a very good time slot. And he called me and he said, Ken, do you want that time slot? And I said, let me think, yes. And so I went on the air on KRLD, and let's see, when did I go on KRLD? It was in 2000. It was close to 2000. And I remember back then, the way we would know if we had business from it is I go back to my house and I would have the answering service, which would get all the calls from the radio show, fax me the reservations. And the reservations would come on a piece of paper, on the fax machine. And there would be 12 reservations on each page. Each one was a box, there'd be, 6 and 6. And each box would have the person's name and their information, so we know to follow up with them. And with KAAM, we would get about 10 or 7 pages coming out of the fax. So right after I got home from KRLD, I immediately called the answering service and I said, can you fax me the reservations? And I was like, see what this is going to be like. So page 1 comes out and I'm like, yes, page 1. Page 2 comes out. Yes. Page 3. Awesome. Page 4. Page 9. Page 11. Page 15. Page 20. So fortunately, I had already started the process of recruiting these other guys from New York Life. And I went to them and I said, I know I had recruited you to help me with what was happening at KAAM, but let me tell you, what's happening at KRLD is going to be over the top. And so that was our beginning. Then what we did was we went back to the radio station and we said, we want to do a show on Sunday, the very same show on Sunday, because the people on Sunday were different than the people on Saturday when we were doing all of our shows. And they said, well, no, you can't do the same show on 2 different days. I convinced them to do it. And sure enough, the Sunday show pulled just like the Saturday show did. And then we went to their competitor. And the competitor, they were like, no, you cannot be on 2 competing stations at the same time. We're not going to let that happen. It's just not going to happen. You can't do that. Well, I convinced them to let me do that. So we were actually on 2 stations doing the exact same show, which I recorded once and gave them to them on a CD. And so that was how we established ourselves here in DFW. So our philosophy of buy, hold, and sell, which I developed, with that by going to that conference and the 200-day moving average, we had been talking to people about how important that was. So Y2K comes along, and at this point we have quite a few clients, and we're engaged and we're working, and the strategy said in October of 2000 that it was time to sell. Now, if you imagine the person who invented the parachute, the first time they jump out of that airplane, that they were really nervous, right? I know this is going to work, but now, this is like the real test. You jump out of an airplane, if it doesn't work, that's not going to be a good thing. So we had never actually implemented our strategy, but we believed in it. So Y2K comes along October, and our strategy says it's time to sell. So what do you do? So what we decided was that we would go to a certain percentage of our clients that we felt were the most adventurous and tell them we've got this idea for this strategy to protect against bear markets. We showed them our analysis and everything that we had done to prove it up. And we said, we think that this is a time to get out. And you have to remember that at that time, there were lots of ups and downs. The market was going crazy with all the dot-coms and all of that. And so every time it went down, people thought it was a buying opportunity, and they were rewarded for that. So here we were saying, this one's not a buying opportunity. This is a selling time. And these, about 25% of our book said, yeah, we'll go with you. We'll do it. And so we got those people out, and the market kept on going down after that. And eventually, by 2002, we pretty much had all of our clients out. I was talking about it on the radio, and we doubled in size the number of people that we were helping over the Y2K because of that. Because we had Y2K to look back on, you fast forward now to 2007, and our strategy said it was time to sell again. This time, we didn't go to 25%. We didn't do any of that. We told our clients, we're getting out. We're selling all. And many of those clients had come to us because they had suffered so much in Y2K that they wanted to be protected against something like that happening again. And when 2007 came and we said it's time to get out in November, they said, go, do it, get us out. And 2008, of course, came along after that, and we were out in that instance for a year and a half. And of course, at the end of we started in 2007 with $300 million of assets under management. By 2010, we had hit $1 billion. And then 3 years later, we hit $2 billion. And so we've had significant growth since then. We decided to do the show in other markets. And I have to look here. So in 2011, we decided to do it in Houston. And it was a weird experience because we had never been outside of the Metroplex here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And I thought that the people in Houston would be from Mars, that if we did the radio show there, they wouldn't care. If we did our seminars, they wouldn't care. They would they're just different. And so we promoted the seminar, and we had, I think it was something like 150 people at the seminar. And I remember when I walked in and I was meeting with all the people, I thought, you know what? If I didn't know where I was, I would think I was in Dallas. The people there were just as nice. They were just as concerned about their security and their retirement. They were the same people that we had loved and enjoyed working with in DFW. And so Houston became a huge success for us. We then opened an office in Oklahoma City. I decided we need to try getting out of our state. Maybe we can actually, so again, I was concerned about Oklahoma City, but those people there were the same wonderful people that we had met in Dallas and in Houston. And then in 2013, we went to Phoenix, and a month later, we went to Austin. And then a year after that, we opened the radio show in Los Angeles. And the show resonated and was very successful. We had a lot of people, and we had a lot of success, a lot of growth in helping lots and lots of people. That was all wonderful. In 2018, as I looked into the future, and I looked into my crystal ball, which, do I still have it here? Yeah, see, no, I won't do that. But anyway, I have a crystal ball. I haven't figured out where the on switch is. But as I looked into my crystal ball, I felt that we were becoming too much known for our invest and protect, our buy, hold, and sell. We were becoming too much known for being a money manager. Some people were accusing us of being a market timer, which we're not. We're a trend watcher, which is very different. And so the idea of changing our name to Retirement Planners of America, or something to do with retirement in the name, kind of was starting to percolate in my head. And I thought, you know what, we need to have a name that more reflects what we do. Money Matters is basically just, to me, it sounded like, and I think people perceived it to be, that you're just a money manager, and worse, you're a market timer. So I kind of thought to myself, what would we be called? If I were to name the company, what would be a great name for us? So I said, Retirement Planners of America sounds like that sounds perfect. That would say what we do. And so I went on my phone, and my wife was driving, and I looked up, can I buy Retirement Planners of America? And unbelievably, retirementplannersofamerica.com was available, and it was $4,000. And I was like, that's impossible. I mean, if you've tried to look for a name for anything with a .com on the end of it, it's all taken. And I thought, a name like that, how could it not be taken? But I said, buy. So I just hit the button and I bought it. And then the next day I thought, well, that's a long thing to type out, retirementplannersofamerica.com. And I said, I wonder if the acronym for it, RPOA.com, is available. And so I looked that up, and sure enough, there it was. It was available too. So I thought, wow, this is unbelievable. It was a little more expensive. It was $14,000. But in the scope of things, I decided that, man, that can't even be true. This is a sign. So I hit buy, and we bought those. A year after that we had those names and all that, but it kind of percolated for another year. And in 2019, we actually decided to pull the trigger and go for the name change and really reflect what we do, which is to help clients achieve their retirement goals. Social Security, insurance, taxes, estate planning, Medicare, 401k planning, all the stuff that we were doing all this time. but that wasn't reflected in our name. And, I had many clients say, "Are you glad you changed your name?" And I said, when I told people before, when they said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm with Money Matters. Their next question is, well, what does Money Matters do? When they asked me that question and I said, I'm with Retirement Planners of America, they would immediately say, "Oh, well, I'm planning on retiring, or my parents are retired. What should they do?" And all. I mean, I didn't have to explain anything; they got it, and they'd immediately dive into, do you have a card? I should talk to you, or whatever. So it just said it. So that to me seemed like just a natural new version of ourselves. And as I record this in 2021, we sit at close to 5 billion. And we work with so many wonderful clients. I think at the last count is 7,000 households, families that we work with. And, I think that our investment philosophy and our radio show and all those things and all the wonderful people that have worked at Money Matters, now ARPOA, I think all of that contributed to our success. But if I were to pick one word that actually I think we owe all of our success to, it's the word love. And our entire reason for being is because we love our clients, we love our employees, we love each other. And for me, that's what motivates me. That's what brings me to work every day. That's what makes me wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and think, wow, we should do it this way or that way, or try to problem solve. It's because, I don't think anybody at ARPOA does any of this because we want to make money. Obviously, we're a business and we do need to make money to stay in business. But for us, it's a labor of love. It's helping people. And I can't think of anything more noble than to help people have financial security during their retirement. I think it's good for society. It's good for those people, their self view, that they feel good about themselves, that they're not dependent on their children, putting hardship on their families or their communities. And if we can help people to achieve that second childhood without parental supervision, if we can have them have peace of mind, if we can have their money last as long as they do, and if we can do that for tens, if not hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, then I think that we've done a good thing. And I can lay on my deathbed and look back and say that I did a good thing. So thank you for watching this video before I get all emotional again, and welcome aboard.